Hey guys, Ben here, aka Wallaby, and welcome to another edition of Endgames with Wallaby. Today we're going to learn how we can stop a pawn from advancing up the board when we just have a queen. We're going to have a look at a position where the pawn's really far advanced up the board and how we can stop it. And we're actually going to have a look at a variation where black can actually draw things. Let's get to it, guys. Alright, so here you can see that black's pawn is only one square away from advancing. It's done well in getting its king to support the pawn, so we can't just take it. So it's going to have to require some specific maneuvering with our queen and our king. Now, when a pawn is a move away from promoting, there are three ways we can stop it. 1, by checking the king. 2, by pinning it to the king. And 3, by forcing the king to move in front of the pawn. First thing we're going to do is check the king. It's probably the most easy way to get the queen position that we want to get it into. Let's say the king moves off to this side so it doesn't block its pawn from advancing. Well, we can keep checking. King shuffles back to protect the pawn. Check again. King shuffles away from the pawn. And now what we're going to do is threaten to take the pawn. Obviously, the king's not close enough to protect the promotion square, so it does have to come closer. And now what we can do is make a little fork. So what we're doing right now is we're checking the king, but we're also threatening to take the pawn. So now the king can't step off this way because we can just take it. So the king is forced in front of the pawn, and this is a key position that we have to continuously reach if we're going to have any hope of getting the king near the pawn. Now we've won ourselves a tempo. Black's no longer threatening to promote the next move, so we can move that king up. Let's say the king steps out to the side, threatening to promote once again. We're going to pin it this time. Pawn is immobilized, so black has to move the king. We'll check it again. Threaten to take the pawn again. Obviously, it can't promote this move. King steps back, and we check. And once again, remembering that check was a fork, so the king was forced to step in front of the pawn again, and we've won yet another tempo. So hopefully, seeing the pattern, the king is able to now shuffle forward again. We're going to keep doing these moves. A pin, a check, threaten to take the pawn, and a fork. Force the king in front of the pawn, move the king up again. Let's do it one more time. Threaten to take the pawn. Little fork, king's in front of the pawn, and we move it up. Now things change a little bit here. There's a few ways of being a bit clinical and finishing things off. First thing we can do is pin the pawn. The king steps back. We have a really pretty checkmate. We actually allow the pawn to promote. It doesn't matter because it's checkmate in the next move. I reckon that's a pretty cool one. The other option we have in this position is to check the king, and after the king advances, we have 2 attackers on the pawn now. We flush the king out. Just be careful of stalemates here. Doesn't quite work because black does have that E1 square, and now we're able to take the pawn. Hopefully you guys know how to checkmate with just a king and a queen on the board against a king. If not, click on this video over here to find out. Just to recap, maneuvering that queen using pins, checks, and threatening to capture the pawn when appropriate. In order to get that king in front of the pawn, I'm going to tempo for our king to advance. If you advance the king enough, you should be able to find a position where you can either checkmate or where you can win the pawn. And that should be all good. All right, let's move on to another position now where black actually can draw. So we're going to have a look at how black can draw this position. We might even flip the board for this one. And it's actually a lot more simple than you might think. So what's the difference in this position? The key difference is that instead of being in the center of the board, the pawn is on the C file. It also works if the pawn is on the F file. The key factor here is that we have a stalemate threat. Let's see how it works. Similar position, queen makes a similar first move, checking our king, remembering that the queen's goal is to eventually make a fork and force our king in front of that pawn. However, we do not have to go in front of the pawn this time. So we reach this position where the queen has that fork, and you'd think, all right, the only way to hold onto the pawn now is to go in front of it But actually, we don't have to hold on to the pawn. Remembering if we did move in front of it, the king would be able to approach, and then we'd be, you know, in that unfortunate scenario again. But even this position's drawing. Let's go back to find out why. If the queen takes when we move the king here, it is stalemate. So, remembering, if we have a bishop's pawn, queen checks, we just put that king in the corner, and white cannot take. So let's see what happens from here. If they don't take, let's say they check, all we have to do is just shuffle back and forth. If they try to follow some other steps to flush the king out, it does not even matter. Anytime that the pawn's threatened to be taken, we can just hide away in that corner. So if you are pushing up that pawn and trying to win a game with a position similar to this, don't let that king on that side. White will maybe be able to flush you out. Try and have the king on this side of the pawn. That way you always have that corner square in your proximity. You can use it at a timely opportunity. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today. Hopefully you learned something. Who knows, it might save a game or two if you've got the white pieces here or the black pieces here. Let me know in the comments below if there's another endgame you'd like me to cover. Click here to see the rest of the Endgames with Wallaby playlist. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Thanks, guys. See you later.